Of St. Laurence takes place in Rome, circa 258 AD. This is the time of the persecutions of Emperor Valerian. The previous year, 257, Valerian published his edicts against the Christians, and Pope Sixtus II, along with many of his co-workers and followers, are arrested and put to death. Now, Sixtus II sits on the papal throne for less than 2 years, but he was a very diplomatic pontiff and repaired relations between the papacy and Cyprian. Cyprian was the bishop of Carthage from around 249 to 258. He had quarreled with the previous pope, Stephen I, who ruled from around 254 to 257 AD. Stephen I overtly makes attempts to assert the primacy of Rome and made many enemies of other rival bishops. The authority of Rome, of course, slowly, gradually becomes a reality, and Christian communities had little choice but to confront this issue, either accepting it or rejecting it. Now, Sixtus II patched up the cracks between Rome and some of the other churches. Unfortunately for him, he becomes the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, just when Valerian was turning into a mega-Christian persecutor. The emperor brings all the muscle of imperial power into his persecutions, and many bishops, many priests, many deacons are arrested and later executed. Sixtus II is arrested in the middle of giving a sermon. This sermon took place at the cemetery of boy, I'm having trouble pronouncing this. Praetexterus, there we go, in Rome, and he's led to the place of execution. Sixtus was beheaded along with 4 deacons on August 6th, 258. Now, St. Laurence, the Spaniard, is the Pope's aide or assistant, and quickly learns of his fate and runs to meet him on the way to his martyrdom. Laurence, weeping, asks the Pope, Sixtus II, "Father, where do you go without your deacon?" Well, Sixtus II tells Laurence, "I do not leave you, my son. You shall follow me in 3 days." St. Laurence is a Spaniard by birth, but he lives in Rome, and he is the keeper of the library of sacred books. And the Pope tells him, "For now, dear Laurence, gather together all the treasures of the church and distribute them to the poor." Laurence says, "Yes, Father," and organizes the faithful together and sells off many of the church's possessions. He sells off the treasure, and he takes the money and buys food with it, giving the food to the beggars in the city square or the Roman Forum. The Spaniard saint, his activities are soon reported to the Emperor Valerian. Valerian, with greed in his eyes and wringing his hands, says, "Treasures, eh? Well, bring this deacon to me at once." Laurence is soon brought before the Roman emperor. Valerian says to the Spaniard, "Your Jesus Christ said to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So bring to me these treasures that your church has." Laurence says to the emperor, "I will do as you ask," and quickly leaves the presence of the emperor. And during the interval of the next few days, Laurence carries out Valerian's instructions faithfully. The Spaniard goes all over the city of Rome and seeks out the poor. These poor are supported by the church, and he gathers them together, a great number of them, and goes back to the Emperor Valerian and invites the emperor to come and see these treasures, the treasures of the church. He tells the emperor, "I have brought all the church's treasures to you. Come and see them." Well, Valerian is shocked and disgusted. He sees only the poor, the homeless, and the wretched of the city of Rome. The emperor is astonished to see such an assembly of misery and misfortune. Valerian turns to the deacon Spaniard with madness in his eyes, with a very threatening look, and tells Laurence, he asks him, "What does all this mean? Where are all the treasures that you promised to me? Show them to me now." Laurence answers, "What are you displeased at? What are you pissed off about? These are the treasures of the church. The poor, the sick, the lame, the widows, the orphans, the homeless. They are what the church values above all else." The emperor's anger doubles. Valerian tells Laurence, "You will pay dearly for your insolence, Christian dog." And according to legend, Valerian has a great gridiron made ready, and places glowing hot coals under it, so that Deacon Laurence, the Spaniard, will be slowly roasted to death. Valerian has the Spaniard stripped and bound upon the iron bed over the slow fire, and begins to cook his flesh a little at a time. Laurence suffers a long time. Despite his immense suffering, his faith manages to overcome his great pain, and he smiles cheerfully, telling his tormentors, "Let my body be turned. One side has been cooked enough." After a while, Laurence tells his executioners that he is done. He has been cooked to perfection. And looking deeply into the eyes of the emperor, who has been gleefully watching the proceedings, the Spaniard tells Valerian, "You may now eat me if you wish. I am ready." St. Laurence dies praying for the conversion of Rome, so that the faith of Christ may spread throughout the world. Then he gives up the ghost and quietly expires. The gridiron of St. Laurence can still be seen at the Church of St. Lorenzo in Rome. The Deacon Spaniard is one of the most venerated saints in the Roman Catholic Church since the 4th century. He is buried in the cemetery of Criasia in Argo Verano in the Via Tiburtina in Rome. The Emperor Constantine builds the first chapel dedicated to St. Laurence on the site of what is now the Church of St. Laurence outside the walls. This church is the 5th patriarchal basilica in the city of Rome. Now, a jar of St. Lawrence's melted fat was donated to Spain by Pope Gregory XIII, circa 1580. Gregory XIII was not exactly a nice guy. He added a militant force to the Council of Trent's Counter-Reformation, and actually welcomed the St. Bartholomew's Day massacres of the Huguenots in France. This notorious massacre takes place on August 22nd and 23rd, 1572. And Gregory XIII actually gave a service of thanksgiving for the dreaded massacre in St. Peter's, believe it or not. Pope Gregory XIII is best remembered for his reforms of the calendar. 10 days, October 5th to 14th, 1582, were consigned to oblivion, and the vernal equinox was adjusted to coincide with Julius Caesar's exact computations. Caesar was the last major calendar reformer before Gregory the 13th. Now, St. Laurence is venerated by Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Anglican churches, and is the patron saint of cooks, librarians, the poor, Sri Lanka, and comedians. He is invoked against fire and lumbago. His feast day is August 10th, and St. Laurence the Spaniard is portrayed in art holding a gridiron and wearing a dalmatic. A dalmatic is a long-sleeved tunic. All right, let's move on to St.